I'm a bit of an evangelist when it comes to Cedar Point because I go there so much and I'm always trying to get friends and family to get passes. Inevitably, whenever you're trying to convince someone who doesn't have a pass to get one, there's a particular thing that they respond with. I don't like roller coasters. In 1989, Cedar Point entered a war. Magnum XL200 opened that year to become the tallest, fastest roller coaster ever built. The war that ensued became known as the Coaster Wars. Parks would take turns each trying to build the tallest, fastest, and longest roller coasters, a battle which would continue for almost 30 years. And for 30 years, Cedar Point has continually placed itself at the center of this war, taking on the records with rides like Magnum in 1989, Millennium Force in 2000, Top Thrill Dragster in 2003. This participation in the Coaster Wars is largely what has built Cedar Point's name. So much so, in fact, that they even nicknamed themselves America's Roller Coast. And many coaster enthusiasts would argue that Cedar Point has the best lineup of roller coasters in the country. Roller coasters aren't just a core part of Cedar Point's identity, they are Cedar Point's identity. This is where the "I don't like roller coasters" comes from. Roller coasters and Cedar Point have become so synonymous that people who even live quite local to the park don't see it as anything more than a place to ride roller coasters. To these people, it's just a place for their teenagers to go and spend a bit of adrenaline or work a summer job. That's all. If you don't like roller coasters, then you may as well stay home. So the core identity of Cedar Point has been roller coasters for over 30 years, and that identity has brought them from being a park to being an icon to many people. However, I would wager that this core identity is no longer helping Cedar Point grow, and for the first time since 1989, Cedar Point is seeing the negative side effects from making steel monsters their entire image. And this is causing a crisis of character for them. When Cedar Point was in the midst of the Coaster Wars, the park posted an incredible record of 3.6 million visitors in 1994 with the opening of Raptor, a number which is an incredible amount of people and signaled a great level of growth. That meant that the Coaster Wars was a viable marketing strategy. It was working. However, the park didn't manage to ever really see any growth beyond that. In fact, the park didn't break that record until the 2018 season, 25 years later. And let's be clear, 3.6 million is a ton of people, and it's definitely not a number to scoff at. It places it solidly in the top 10 highest visited parks in the US, and it has for decades. While that plateau has satisfied Cedar Point for a while, I think the marketability of fastest, tallest, longest, mostest coaster just simply isn't what it used to be. And with the opening of Steel Vengeance in 2018, I think it marked a shift in attitude for Cedar Point. This identity has positioned Cedar Point in a place where they've steadily had 3 to 4 million visitors a year for 30 years now. With that in mind, it paints a clear picture of what the marketability of roller coaster capital of the world will get you. The answer is 3 to 4 million people. And hey, listen, if that's what you're at and you're comfortable, that's fine. But the reality of most businesses is that they want to grow. So the question is, how is it that Cedar Point can grow more than 3 to 4 million visitors a year? And I'm sure the coaster enthusiasts immediately begin thinking of the different coasters they could build that would pin them back as the must-visit park of the next season. But I want those of you who are doing that to slow down and listen to what I'm saying again. Cedar Point has been doing that as the roller coaster market dominator for 30 years, and that has netted them the same attendance numbers that entire time. What that says is that you, and every other enthusiast are already within the captured market. Building more roller coasters only helps them to continue to invite the same people, aka you, back, who have already been going there. Which isn't a bad thing, but it seems Cedar Point has hit a soft cap on what it means to cater to the coaster community. This niche has a limit. In order to go bigger, they need to break out of this niche. Cedar Point has ranked in the top 10 parks in the US for decades, so let's take a look at the other parks that are ranking above them and think through a few of the differences between their markets against Cedar Point. The lineup consists, of course, of the Disney parks, aka Magic Kingdom, Epcot, Hollywood Studios, Animal Kingdom, California Adventure, and Disneyland. And of course, Universal's Islands of Adventure, Florida, and Hollywood Parks are also included. In addition to them, Knott's Berry Farm and SeaWorld Orlando both topped Cedar Point in attendance. It's quite the ladder that Cedar Point would need to climb, but there are 3 factors that all these parks have in common. First, they're all open year-round. Second, they're all parks that put families at the forefront of their experience. And third, they're all located in either Florida or California. So if we put ourselves in the shoes of Cedar Point management and begin looking at the ladder in front of us and asking us the question, how can we climb it? We can take these notes and really put together a collection of options. Cedar Point's not in Florida or California, and there really isn't anything that they can do about that. So that's immediately eliminated as something they can emulate. The park would really struggle as an all-year park, and in fact, that's something I have an entire separate video planned on. So, of the 3 similarities that all the parks above them share, there's only a single one which they could actually potentially take notes from. And that is that the parks that are performing better than them are family parks first. Being family parks isn't a coincidence either. Families are a far larger niche than coaster enthusiasts. So much that Knott's Berry Farm can only be 1/7 of the size of Cedar Point and still put up an incredible turnout. And the reason for that is families. Cedar Point absolutely sees this. And in 2018, they released Steel Vengeance, which became one of the most beloved coasters in the park nearly instantly. With not 1, but 2 coasters in the roster that had no standout specification, I think Cedar Point management had an epiphany and a shift of vision. Great coasters can exist outside of the coaster wars, and by expanding that thought process, a park full of great coasters can exist outside of the identity of the coaster wars. And so Cedar Point could still be a top park in the country for roller coasters without being America's roller coast. Can we maintain our reputation and current fan base and also expand our market to appeal to a larger niche? Can we be both a roller coaster park and a family park? Right after Steel Vengeance, they launched the Farmhouse, which became the 2nd most visited restaurant in the park. And more than a restaurant though, this also involved an extensive amount of seating, scenery, and even a small live music stage to the area. And more importantly, it took the antique cars and replaced it with something that felt much more cohesive to the park. And they followed that up with the boardwalk, which is relatively self-explanatory in the ways through which it sounds like it provided a unified family experience by moving multiple rides, building a new restaurant, a bar, adding a family coaster. It really pulls together another area into a cohesively themed family area. And even when introducing Top Thrill 2, they took the opportunity to pull together that entire area by giving the buildings a new paint scheme and uniting the Power Towers paint scheme to Top Thrills. They also added some new games, a small bar, and more stuff. They seem to be following a scheme of finding a mix between introducing a roller coaster and finding a way to better theme the park, as well as introduce non-coaster and family elements alongside the coasters. To be clear, I'm not just talking about jumping between building coasters and other attractions, because Cedar Point's always flip-flopped its development money between them. What I am talking about is the intention and cohesiveness they are trying to design things with now. They're no longer just building attractions, they're building areas with coasters, bars, restaurants, and family rides in those areas. And they're taking existing rides and areas and finding ways to better incorporate them into their surrounding. But how much more are they going to need to do to expand their niche? Well, I think a ton. Boardwalk is a good place to start, but it's just the beginning. Currently, Cedar Point struggles to even be a 2-day park, and if they truly want to make a much bigger impact, they need to be at least a 3-day park for guests. This means that for guests to come, there needs to be enough to do for everyone in the family to stay occupied for 3 days. This means that the coaster-loving teen needs enough thrills for 3 days. The baby sister needs enough kids rides to occupy her. And there's enough scenery to keep dad on his feet. And importantly, this means that there needs to be a level of exploration to the park that I don't think currently exists. Guests need to feel a little bit lost, like there's just too much to do. This also includes out-of-park activities, like improving their resorts or introducing joint activities with other businesses in the area. There's so much that Cedar Point could do that I definitely can't get it all into this video, but let's just think about this. The area where Cedar Point already has this very well covered is the number of rides. However, some of the other things I mentioned, such as shops, places to duck inside of, places to explore, scenery to enjoy, and non-ride activities are all pushed to the side. Even their shows and musicals have really taken a back seat. These are the things that Cedar Point can heavily invest in to really take in-park activities to the next level. There needs to be enough to do that someone can spend an entire day in the park and never even ride a ride. So that's it for me today. Sound off in the comments, guys. Do you agree? Do you think that Cedar Point is kind of reshaping their image to kind of fit two niches into one world? And what do you think of their progress so far? And what do you think they have planned in the future? Let me know in the comments, and I hope to see you next time. And don't forget that you are beautifully and wonderfully made, and you are loved. And that's the whole point. See you next time.